Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatiron's Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatirons.tuning.com and stay tuned with Flatiron's Tuning.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Flatiron Syndicate Podcast. We've got a guest joining us today, Mr. Dominic Acia, a man who probably needs no introduction, because Dom, you've been a staple in the Subaru community for a good while now. I'm not gonna say how long, but let's just say it's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. You can say how
And
long, it's all right.
is it 30 years, give or
Well, for
take?
Subarus,
20?
24.
Okay,
Yeah.
a long time, a couple
Yeah.
decades. Um, and so maybe is a good a place to start to any is how did you first find Subarus? Like where did this all start?
This is actually a fun story, believe it or not. So I've always been a car guy. When I was a kid, my dad had a fast car, and I I remember him building the engine for it with his friend in the garage, and I was like 10 or 11.
Hmm.
And I was, my nose was in there. I'm looking, trying to figure out what's going on, but I didn't know anything yet. And that car later became my first car.
Oh,
And it was a 73 Pontiac Grand Am. It had a 455, a built turbo hydro 400, 356 posi rear end,
wow.
Edelbrock carburetor, intake manifold, had a tuned exhaust. It had a big ass cam in it, and it was awesome. In fact, I have a picture of it. Let's see if I can show it.
And that was your first car?
Yeah, my first car,
Wow.
540 horsepower.
Oh man.
Yeah, this is a really old picture. This is from the 90s. You can see how worn out it is around the edges.
Oh my gosh.
But let's see if I can get in there.
Yeah.
That's me doing a burnout in front of my house in high
Man.
school. Yeah, so
So you've been a car guy since d day one, basically.
yeah, yeah, cars and motorcycles. I used to race motocross. My dad raced motocross, and so therefore, by proxy, I ended up racing motocross at some point or
Sure.
another. So my first motorcycle was a 1984 CR 500, um, which, you know, think about two strokes, that's the holy grail of two strokes.
Oh wow.
The last year of the air-cooled 500cc two-stroke, and the 500 class was too fast at the time.
Hmm.
It exceeded the suspension capabilities of the time, I guess, and safety, and so they ended up phasing out the 500 class. They kind of banned them from racing, um,
Okay.
and I learned to ride on that. And so it was a lot of flag pulling with the bike going and my legs dangling behind it because it was
Oh
so
man.
fast. I was little. I was late bloomer, so I was really small. I did not grow up very quick, um, in more ways than one. And so I both of my first vehicles were kind of trial by fire in that regard. But
Yeah. Sounds
unfortunately,
like.
it corrupted me a little bit. You know, I've always liked speed, and not top speed, but just the G forces of acceleration. I've always been a sucker
Sure.
for that.
Sure.
Um, so when I was 19, I joined the military. At the time, I had traded my truck in like a moron for an 87 Plymouth Sundance.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
No,
Um,
Sundance is not one of those Plymouths that jumps out
yeah, and oh
easily.
man, whoo,
Yeah.
it was a fast machine, 2.5 liter four cylinder with like no horsepower.
Right.
And that was obviously a huge departure from where I had been when I previously had my Pontiac. Um, and I was married for the first time, and we got her an 96 Ford Escort LX. And this is new in
Yeah.
96 or 97 that we got it.
Practical car.
Yeah, and it was a sporty little two-door one,
Yeah.
so it looked cool. And in 96 there wasn't a lot of stuff really out there other than DSMs and Grand Nationals and stuff. So there wasn't a whole lot of speed cars of the day. And I was just jonesing for another car, and I picked up a 1972 Pontiac Le Mans GT. Um, and it was a Florida car, but it was sitting next to the ocean for a long time, Florida
Ooh.
car. And you could look in the back window and see your feet because the back deck had rusted out and the
Oh
trunk had
boy.
rusted out below it. So you could like look at your toes and see the rear end through the back window. Um, and so I had the Escort and the Pontiac, and I bought a truck because I missed my semi truck. So I had a 77 Chevy. And as such, since the other cars were so old and problematic, I was driving the Escort a lot.
Sure.
And being a Ford, I was driving a Escort to the dealership a lot to get work done. It's kind of how it worked out. So one day it was a Ford Subaru dealership in upstate New York, of the weird combinations of a joint Ford Subaru thing.
Yeah.
And I'm taking the Escort in to get a new engine again put in it under warranty. Thank goodness I had that warranty.
Wow.
Again. And I say again because it was multiple times. It dropped a valve seat and I was taking my girlfriend to the airport one day. Oh, I was divorced to that. So anyways, I'm in the dealership and I'm just walking around because I'm doing work on my car, and I walk into the showroom and I see a 98 Subaru Impreza sedan.
Mm.
And I'm like, what is this? I've never seen this before. What the heck is a Subaru? Oh yeah. My first wife's mom had a Subaru. I remember that. It was a Justy or something along those lines with like a selectable four-wheel drive. But that was it. That was all I knew about Subaru. And then I thought it's more like, oh, you know what? One guy back in my power school, which is a naval school, my power school, he had a Subaru Legacy. He was a big stereo guy, big subs and everything. But that was it. That's all I could remember about Subarus. Didn't know anything about them. And so this is 97, obviously, because it's 98 Subaru. And I'm looking at it like, man, I like this thing. I like the way it looks. I like it a lot. And I was just staring at it. And I go to the service guy who I was quite intimate with now at this point. Like, we knew each other very well. And I'm like, dude, what is this? What's this car out here? This thing is pretty cool. He goes, oh, it's a Subaru. I was like, yeah. I go, what can you tell me about him? He says, it's the best kept secret in the automotive industry. And I was like, well, really? He goes, well, look out here. Look at all my bays. He's got like 12 or 14 bays, right? He goes, how many Subarus do you see out there? I'm looking, I'm like, none. And he's like, exactly. I was like, huh. So I started walking around, and then I saw the Legacy 2.5 GT, and I was like, oh, I like that one too. And just that era of the Subaru, I really, really like that era of the Subaru. And I was like, I have to have one. I have to have one. That's what it's going to be. And I was enlisted in the Navy, divorced, had these two money pits, this Le Mans that I had put probably 10 grand in 1997 money into.
Wow.
Building the engine, the transmission. I did all in my garage. The thing ripped. But with all the holes in it, I had a tiny oil leak that dripped on the header, so it just started to smoke every now and then. But it would just suck it right into the cab.
Oh man.
And every time you punched on it, more oil would drip and more smoke would just billow into the cab. And so my friends, they affectionately called it the asphyxiation machine.
Sounds purpose built for something like that. Yeah.
It was really good. So it was really fun though. It was really fast. I did all the PST polygraphite suspension stuff to it, and it ripped. It was really fast. Built the transmission. It was a 350 actually, turbine 350. Built it myself in the, what do they call it in the Navy? The hobby shop. They call it the hobby shop, where you go work on your own cars and stuff. So I built it there over a week, and it shifted just right. It was really, it barked third. You hit third gear and you grab a chirp out of third too.
Wow.
So it was good.
It doesn't sound very much like a Subaru. So, I mean, when you finally got the Subaru, did that scratch a needed itch, or was it just at that point just a utilitarian car?
No, it was definitely something I was going to get for the the purpose of having fun with. So I have these cars, these money pits, and I want the Subaru. So I try to sell the Le Mans. I'm trying to sell a damn car, and I'm having no luck. And so I put it on eBay. First time ever using eBay. I have no idea how it works.
Oh wow! And back in the 90s?
Yeah, like the beginning of eBay, right? So I end up selling it for $1,700 or something. Like at auction is what I went for. Yeah, it wasn't good. I didn't know the whole like what's it called?
Reserve or something?
Yes, the reserve, right. And I don't know if they called it reserve then. I think they might just said minimum bid or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about that. And so the guy shows up to get the car. I'm bitter because I'm selling my car that I've got so much money and time into for like $1,700. And he's sitting there with his trailer and cash in hand. And I walk up to the car and I fire it up. I mean, it just, The thing was
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah.
And I pull it back, I back it out, and I look at him, I get the car, and he looks at me and goes, "Holy crap, I'm getting a lot of car for my money." I was like, "Yes, yes, you are."
Oh
Yes.
man.
Yeah, yeah, you are. Um, so I sold that, I sold the truck, and um, all of a sudden, I don't even know what happened to the Ford anymore. So
Now,
I sold everything.
yeah.
I had two cars, a truck, a motorcycle, and a four-wheeler. I had a Suzuki, I had the Chevy, the Le Mans, yeah, and so I sold everything, and I bought the Subaru.
Okay.
And this was now October 24th, 2000 that I picked up this car.
Okay. So it took a little bit
Now,
of time.
it took time. Yeah, it took
Okay.
years. And during
Okay.
that time, I was following Subarus. I learned about WRC, right? That's how I
Mm,
learned what WRC was, because of Subarus. I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. I'm watching all this rally racing. And I'm like, I want a WRX, but they don't have them here. So the next best thing is this 2.5 RS. And so like I'm all in before I even have one, right? I've had years
yeah.
now to just dive into it. And I am pumped about this car. And I finally get the money saved up, and I go to find one, and I can't find one. I go to the
Mm,
dealership, and I'm like, I want an Impreza, I want a coupe. And they're like, we can't find any. I'm
mm.
like, what? So I'm out driving around one day with some friends, and I drive by a dealership and I see a white one,
Oh,
as I go by, a white coupe. And I was like, oh my God, that looks so good. And so I go up there, and it had some features that I didn't want and options I didn't want to pay for. And the dealership was like, yeah, we can't take them out. So, I was like, oh. So I'm back to my dealership, Goldstein
yeah.
Subaru in Albany, New York. And I told them, I found the Subaru, it's over here, but it has things I don't want. And they're like, we'll take them out, no problem. I'm like, sweet.
Wow.
So I got this thing for 19,700, I think. I think that's what I paid for it at the time.
Okay.
I think I had the original window sticker and bill of sale actually in the drawer over here.
Oh man.
Uh, yeah, I still have it. Like, I love that car. So I get this white coupe. I'm totally in love with it. And uh, it's definitely not a speed machine.
Right.
It's better than the Escort,
Sure.
but it couldn't touch the Pontiac.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
but it was still fun. It was lighter, right, than a lot of cars. And it was a lot of fun, and I love the styling. I like the interior. It was my first new car,
Yeah.
first brand new car. The 96 Escort was 6,000 miles used, so it was close to my first new car, but
Yeah.
the Impreza was my first new car, and I loved it. I love that car.
Wow.
And
And you still have it. So I mean, it
I still
obviously
have
made an
it.
impression, and
Yeah.
it's still making an impression on you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's in the driveway right now. Bumpers off of it. I'm building a twin turbo kit for it.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's my
Well, so
car, man.
yeah. Well, was the fact that it was you liked it, but it did not scratch that need for speed. Is that
Hmm.
kind of what started you down this path? Well, I mean, it sounds like you've always been modifying things, but of
Yeah.
like tearing into it and like, okay, well, how can I make this faster, better, do WRC things, all that?
So I get it October 24th, 2000. November 3rd, I get orders to Pearl Harbor.
Okay. Okay.
So I have it for a week, and I had an entire stereo system in my garage on standby waiting for the car to get delivered. And so I get the
Wow.
car, it's got 500 miles. I take it to the stereo place, and they put in this big stereo for me. And they break the carbon fiber trim piece on the bezel, back that fake carbon fiber overlay that
Yeah.
the Prezas have.
Yep.
They break that, and I throw a fit because the car's brand new, and
Yep.
I'm petty. And so they buy me a whole new kit, which is like $300, right? But they did.
Hmm.
I feel bad about it now, but that's just, I was young, my first new car.
That's
And
the way it goes.
so I put it on a container ship with 500 something miles on it and sent it to Hawaii.
Wow.
And then, oh, that's not true. That's not true. I drove it across the country first, and then put it on a container ship, and
Okay.
and and then went to Hawaii. So I get to Hawaii, and I have a Subaru, and
Hmm.
that's really all I know. And I know WRC exists. I know I have a Subaru, and I go to a track day out there, a drag racing event. Actually, it was drag racing on Wednesday nights at Hawaii Raceway Park. That doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
And I'm just watching drag race. I'm not running my car or anything yet. And some guys walk up to me like, "Hey, is that your car?" I was like, "Yeah." I go, "Oh, hey, we're in a club. I'm like, okay, what is it? He goes, it's called iClub. It just
Oh,
started. He's like, it just started. It's a fresh club. He's like, would you like to join or, hang out with us and that kind of thing? And I was like, yeah, I like car guys, so let's do that. So I'm one of like the super early members of iClub,
okay. Yeah,
which became Naziok and then
sure.
became iClub again. And then that whole fiasco happened. But so then through these guys, I realized, oh crap, there's a whole aftermarket for these cars. I didn't
Mm,
know there was an aftermarket for the car. So within a few months, I've got sway bars and strut tower braces and intake and tube,
hmm.
and mostly Cobb stuff at the time. And what else I do? I ended up doing springs. I did the white line springs. I did
So this is like 2000, 2001,
yeah,
like very early
this
on.
is very early 2001. Yeah.
This is probably like very, very early internet forums too. Like, well,
Oh
as
yeah.
you said, like it was right at the beginning of iClub. I mean, you had some iconic cars in your early history. Did you have any kind of an experience like that, like you had with the Subaru? People would just like seek you, like, hey, we're in a club about this car that you have. You should come join us. Be one of us.
The Subaru was the first car for that.
Okay.
Yeah. There were always guys like, whoa, dude, that car's pretty cool. Like my Pontiac was ugliest. Everyone said it was so ugly. And it was ugly. It was an ugly car. But I loved it. I mean, DeLorean made ugly looking cars. That's what he did. He used to work for
Hmm.
Pontiac. He was the designer for all that stuff. He made
Right.
ugly cars. But I really liked them. It was just different. I've always been a little different. I like the different styling. I like things that are a little edgy, kind of in your face. Um, and that's the way the Pontiacs of that era were. And then the Subaru wasn't ugly at all, but it had accents and
Hmm.
flair, that most cars didn't have back then.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I never had anybody approach me like I would get approached with the Subarus. And pretty
Yeah.
much from then on, like it was from then on, um, that Subaru was like an invitation, for so many people to come and talk to me.
I bet, especially in Hawaii, where there probably was not a whole lot of Subarus out there to begin with. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't think the need for all-wheel drive on an island in is that high, but I mean, I know that there's people out there that have them and love them, but yeah.
yeah, it's a pretty good sized club, and we did a lot of racing. I raced 4 times a week in the
Wow.
car. In the first year, I put 29,000 miles on the car on an island,
Wow. Wow.
on the island of Oahu. And during that time, for 6 months, I was at sea. So really, I
Jeez.
put 29,000 miles on it in 6 months. Driving to and from downtown Honolulu from my house on the other side of the island, I was partying it up, man. Holy crap, I was so drunk
Wow.
all the time. And yeah, I was doing a lot of partying and a lot of racing. So
And a
I
lot of
drove the
driving.
car, yeah, a couple hundred miles a day,
Yeah.
just going to and from, doing going around the island and then all the racing and everything. So I put a lot of
Wild.
miles on it in the first year.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah,
I don't know if I could do that now if you told me I had to put almost 30,000 miles on a car in a year. 6 months, I can tell you for sure no. It's like
I love the
I'd quit
drive.
my job and just drive. But
I love the drive.
yeah,
I'll sit in the car for hours driving. I do all the time.
nice.
Yeah, I love
Well,
road trips.
and it sounds like you found the car, you found the community. It just everything just fell into place and off you went.
It
Where
was it was the most welcoming place I've ever been in that regard, for
yeah,
sure.
when did you when did you decide? Because you've made Subarus into a career for yourself. When and how did you decide like that you were going to make that transition?
So before Subarus, I was working on the domestics.
Okay.
So carb tuning started for me in high school, when I got
Oh,
that
sure.
Pontiac, and then I had a truck, and then my friends had trucks, and I was helping them with their cars, and when I first got that Pontiac, it didn't run anymore. My dad had neglected it so much that it didn't run. And I knew what it was. Like I just had this feeling of what was wrong with it. And I'd help my
Mm,
friends with their cars and stuff. So I reverse psychology my dad into selling me that car instead of the truck. And
okay.
I would have taken either the truck or the car. He's like, which car do you want to buy for me, for your first car? And so I really wanted the Pontiac, but I hinted more that I wanted the truck
Mm.
and knowing that he wouldn't give me what I wanted. So
Oh.
I hinted heavily towards the truck, and then he was like, "Nah, well, it's really good for dump runs. So I'll just sell you the Pontiac." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't run." He goes, "Yeah, I know, but that way you can get it running and all that." I'm like, "Okay, gee, thanks."
Hmm.
So so then I go into the garage where I have the carb rebuild kit hiding, and I go out to the Pontiac and I pull the carb off, I rebuild the carb, put it back on, and within an hour I fire that thing up and drive out the driveway. I'm like, "Sucker,"
Oh man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So um rebuilding carbs and adjusting carbs. Everybody in the 90s went too big. They all went 750 when they needed 500 or 600. And when you do that, you upset the pressure across like the metering rods, or based on what kind
Hmm.
of carburetor it is, or the power valve or the timing, all that stuff. So I was getting really good at adjusting those things. And the next thing I knew, my friends were telling their friends, "Hey, Dominic, this got my friend Dominic helped me with my car." And then they would tell their friends. Next thing I know, I'm getting calls from people. I don't even know who the heck they are. "Hey man, I heard you could work with carburetors." And so I started helping people.
Okay.
And so starting in high school, I've always been helping people with their cars. Um,
Okay. Now I think we should pause there because as it is 2024, there's probably a lot of people watching and listening to this that don't actually have maybe as clear a picture of what a carburetor does. I'm going to say just in broad strokes, you were effectively tuning these cars by doing what you're describing, by changing the jets and the carbs. But
exactly.
can you just quick overview of what a carb does and what you were doing, like what your thought process was when you're trying to set up these carbs?
Okay. So in a carburetor, which is mounted to the top of the intake manifold, is the main source of air ingestion for an engine. Um, the carburetor contains what's called a venturi, which is really just a cylindrical tube for it, and that's got a thin spot in the middle, basically. It's called a venturi. And so when air passes through this venturi, a differential pressure is formed across those parts in the venturi. And so I know you know this, John. Just telling people
Sorry,
that might
yeah,
not know.
yep, nope.
And so the those pressure differentials draw fuel into the engine. So the differential pressure between the lowest pressure in the venturi and the atmospheric pressure outside helps to push fuel into the engine. Now, what you have to do based on the engine's volume, and the cam, or how much air it pulls at various RPMs and throttle positions, you got to change the size of the orifice that meters how much fuel goes in those points. And so what I was doing was adjusting those various port sizes to ensure that when that vacuum signal is very weak, when you're, say, at idle, and the throttle blade is shut. So at idle, since the throttle blade is shut, there's no significant amount of air going through that barrel. And so you have to draw fuel in a different way. It can be through the
Mm,
venturi. You get to do engine vacuum on the bottom side of the throttle blade, to through a small metering orifice to the float bowl where the fuel is kept. And then that sucks it in. And then when you open it up, now there's no more vacuum right here anymore. And so you rely on the vacuum created by the venturi to draw the fuel in. So the transitions between when the carburetor wants to use the bottom ports for idle, maybe mid throttle positions for those metering rods, or when it's full open and we're adjusting what's just called the main jets, is important, and to get the right sizes. And so what I was doing was find that people were putting way bigger carbs with way bigger jets than they needed on their engines, and they were getting overfueled and running too rich. And so you go in and shrink the jets down a bit, adjust the metering rods, to change those transition points and all that stuff. So in effect, absolutely, I was tuning the cars. We didn't, I mean, it was called carb tuning, I guess, but I never called it carb tuning. I was just adjusting your carburetor for you, is what I was doing, along with some distributor stuff,
sure.
and turn
And
the
that
air cleaner
and
over,
that's
kind of thing.
timing, and I mean you're
Yeah.
doing all this stuff and
Hmm.
from an early age, but like did you like now what you were doing, but at the time it sounds like you were just trying to make the car run better. And
Yeah,
you had figured out how to make the car run better.
yeah, I didn't know nearly as much then, obviously, as I know now. I've been doing it for so many years, and I there was a lot of, I know if I do this, this happens. Like, I
Hmm.
knew that. I know it's puking black smoke, so there's getting too much fuel.
Right.
I need to put a smaller jet in. I knew it's idling chunky, and rich. I can taste it smell it or see it. I got to change the jet sides. I did a lot by smell and a lot by sound back then. I still do a lot of smell and sound, like when I tune. And I think that's something that is missed in tuning now. Everyone's relying on just numbers on a screen these days,
Sure.
and e-tunes and all that stuff. And I really feel that people are getting robbed when they're doing that. Like someone like me who uses all my senses when tuning a car, I catch so many install errors, component problems, or whatever because I feel it, or I hear it, or I smell it. Like there's so much that goes on tuning a car. It's not just these numbers on the screen. Like I catch a lot. Shoot, just day before yesterday or a couple days ago on the dyno. I'm on the dyno. I go to a pole. Pop, 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 pop. Car starts misfiring. I'm like, oh, spark plug's cracked, guys. And they're like, what? How do you know that? I'm like, by the sound. Now, if I was e-tuning somebody, I would see a misfire. Oh, yeah, maybe you're too rich. Maybe you got weak spark. Maybe you got, injector problem. But no, I heard the sound that a cracked spark plug makes. It makes a specific type of misfire. And I heard that, and immediately the guys go, well, the brand new plugs, let's just change the coil packs around. And they look at me, and I look at them, I go, sure. And so they change the coil packs, and exact same problem. And one of the guys turns to Tanner, he goes to Lane, he goes, he knew what the problem was. And I was like, And he goes, and he looked at us, and he just said, sure. He goes, and they were giving each other a hard time for not listening. But there's that aspect of it that people don't pay attention to. The sight, the sound, the smell, the feel, the vibrations in the chassis, or the steering wheel, or your feet, all that stuff. The clutch pedal. Like whenever I'm tuning, all that stuff is just pouring in my body. I can't listen to music when I'm tuning because it's all about the car. And so that all started though with the carburetors.
Like you having to like look at all of the information that you can take in, be it sight, sound, smell, whatever, because those are the tools that you have. And your advantage is, well, now you've got all those tools, and now you're just adding to that tool set versus like some of the guys like with modern cars. I mean, you don't have to build up that skill set necessarily.
No, my currently available instrumentation is way beyond what I had back then.
Sure, for sure. Yeah, things have changed. Well, and so you said you started with domestics and then moved to Subarus.
So that transition, so there was the whole domestic thing, and then I go to Subarus, and this is fuel injection. And all I've done for fuel injection is like the Excel fuel injection kits that you get for the Chevy 350s or the early Holley throttle body injection sets that just came out. That was like the extent of my fuel injection experience. So I'm learning fuel injection on the Subaru.
Okay.
Now, what's different about that is, I guess that wouldn't be quite true because I did have some experience with the early Lancers. What they called Lancers in the U.S.? It was a Dodge Lancer, right? Isn't that what it's called? Or LeBaron.
Laser.
Chrysler LeBaron and lasers. Yeah, the lasers and LeBarons of those. So my friend had one. They're fuel injected, they're turbocharged, but there's like 600 vacuum hoses. Like it's just this whole thing, right? And by the time the Subaru comes out, actuator technology has improved. And that's really what it boils down to, right? If you think about it, back then we used vacuum and diaphragms to do things mechanically because our electrical actuator technology sucked. Right? Now it's improved. Our sensors have improved. The actuators have improved. All that's improved. So this 2.5 RS had the most basic and simple yet functional fuel injection system of any car basically up to that time. Every component had a purpose. Every actuator was compact. It was electronically controlled. The only actuator that was really vacuum controlled would be in the fuel pressure regulator, right? Diaphragm and that. And then the cruise control system.
Right.
And I think that's it on that car. It was the only thing that was vacuum operated anymore.
Yeah.
So you see this progression of actuator technology and the simplification of the fuel injection systems combined with better O2 sensors, mass airflow sensors. They're not swinging doors anymore, right? We got hot wire stuff.
And computer technology. You've got better computers that can actually, take in all these sensors and make it all work and make it run.
Yeah. Faster processors, more available RAM. I mean, my first computer was a Macintosh Classic, and I had 4 megabytes of RAM, and I had a 50 megabyte hard drive.
Yeah.
Right. That's not an MP3.
No.
Right? That's
Yeah.
not, I can't even fit an MP3 on that anymore. So,
Yeah. Yeah, you forget,
it's come up.
man, back in the 90s, it was a weird time where, I mean, it was all about the megabytes and the kilobytes.
Yeah. Yeah, not
And
anymore.
man, that's probably even before CD-ROM
Hmm.
was out. Yeah.
Oh no, it was floppies. Yeah, 3.5 inch.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
floppies.
Yes.
Yeah,
We're
back then it
dating
was like,
ourselves here a
here's
little
my
bit.
capacitor. It
Yeah.
was this
Yeah.
gigantic thing, right? And now
Yep.
they're so small you can't even read what they are anymore on PCBs.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, so
and
exactly.
computers are getting better. Car computers are getting better. It's all changing. It's all related.
Yeah.
So, and then you finally decide to make a career path change, right?
Yeah, that hasn't happened yet.
Still
Honestly,
hasn't
it
happened.
still hasn't
Okay.
happened. No,
So you're still just doing this for fun,
for
like, or
fun
just as
and
a
with
hobby?
friends. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I was in power school, which was before I got the Subaru,
Uh-huh.
I had the Pontiac and I'm in power school and they're teaching us physics, electronics, chemistry. I was an electrician by trade, so I was learning motors and generators and controllers and solenoids and you name it. And then in addition to nuclear power plants, fluid flow, thermodynamics, heat transfer, uh, turbine stuff, Bernoulli's, all that stuff, enthalpy,
Hmm.
like they were teaching us tons and tons of stuff, 13 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
It was intense. But while I was doing that, I was realizing, oh, that's how an alternator works, right? And then they're
Mm.
showing these magnetic fields and how all this stuff generates electricity and what comes out, and then they rectify it like we do. And I'm like, oh, that's how this works. And then another part of the nuclear process was you had to know how all the sensors and meters and gauges and stuff worked. That was a requirement. And the reason for that is if you're operating a nuclear power plant and you see an indication that could be really bad, you need to be able to know, well, is that an actual indication or is the gauge failing? Is the sensor giving
Oh,
me a wrong issue? Right. So you had to learn to process the other stuff around it and make sure that was correct.
okay.
And so they taught you how every gauge worked, like that, how the tube bent and functioned, would move the gear, board on tube gauges, just straight on mechanical, linear actuators, ammeters, voltmeters, like you name it. They taught us how everything worked. And so while I'm doing this learning nuclear power plants, I'm learning cars. Because
Yeah.
that's where I'm at, right? I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
power plants, yay, but I'm like, fuck yeah, cars, right?
Yeah.
So I'm my oh, a heater core. Oh, that's why this works that way. Oh, the water
Sure.
pump is, we're taught pumps, hydraulics, centrifugal positive displacement, pump, you name it, man. They taught
Yeah.
us so much stuff, like how everything works pretty much. And
And it all, you could tie it right back to all the car stuff that you're interested in because, like, at the core, the function of these sensors and gauges and, you know, physical mechanisms and stuff, it's all related.
yeah,
They're all just systems.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really awesome. And so I'm going through that, I'm learning about the cars, and I find that every step that I'm doing on my own stuff is getting easier because I
Mm.
have this deeper knowledge now. And I thought I was hot shit. I thought I knew a lot about cars. And then I'm realizing I don't know anything about cars. I just know more than that guy.
Mm.
But I don't know much,
Yeah.
overall. So so I get the Subaru and I'm learning about it, and I'm in the Navy, I'm in submarines. I disappear for 200 something days a year underwater.
Wow.
And there's definitely no other career going to happen at that time. And finally the WX comes out and they start showing up at the track days. Um, it was, I think it was like 4 or 5 months after I got my car, they announced the WX was coming to the States. And I was
Hmm.
so pissed. I was so pissed because I wanted
Uh-huh.
WX and they didn't have it. And I get my car and I can't afford another car at this time. And they're like, "Right, WX is coming." And I was like, oh, I got freaking bamboozled. And then I saw a picture of it. I'm like, oh, it's hideous. Great. I'm good.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
I did not like the bug eye at all. I still don't.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the bug eye when it came out. I thought it hurt my eyes. And I was like, oh, thank God. And there's no coupe. Oh, perfect. I'm
Right.
okay. So they start hitting the tracks. People start, modifying them. I'm racing cars. Like I said, I race my car 4 times a week. And I'm trying to help those guys with their cars, but I don't know. I don't know turbos yet. I don't know how a turbo works. I don't know that stuff yet. I know how a turbine works, I know a centrifugal compressor works. So I know what a turbo does, how it does it, but how it affects the engine, I haven't got there yet. And so some of my car club mates get WRXs, STIs, and they start doing modifications, and I'm helping them out. And then Shiv comes out one time. Remember Shiv from
Shift
Vishnu
Pathic?
Tuning?
Yep.
He came out, he did a tuning trip, and I was stuck to him, the whole time, looking over his
Sure.
shoulder, trying to, learn stuff. And we got 4 guys in an '03 WRX going on the track. He's got a VF22 in it, or 34, one of those turbos at the time. And, Shiv's tuning it while we're bombing around this track. Like I said, 4 dudes in it. And even with 4 guys in it, it was way faster than my car. And I was like, this is what I want. This is what I want.
Yep.
This is what I'm going to do to my car. So I saved up money, bought a turbo kit, much to the chagrin of my wife at the time. And second wife, I got married again.
Okay.
And I start learning turbo stuff, like more in depth on my own, experimenting on my own, learning the systems, trying to learn fabrication because I couldn't fabricate. And yeah, I just was really diving into it. And let's see, I leave Hawaii and I've been battling engine management issues. Like I have this RS, but it's got the factory computer. Nobody can tune those computers yet. Still really can't, like barely can. And I'm getting fed up with getting these piggybacks. I got like a split second FTC1 on there to try and reduce timing. And I got RC engineering injectors in there, which is a huge mistake. Don't ever do that. And I put cams in it. I had Cobb cams in it. I had a Lude Speed T3, T4 turbo kit. I had no intercooler.
Right.
And I had a Blitz DSBC boost controller on it. And what else did I do with it? A few other things, but I still just fighting. It didn't run right, made good power, went idle for crap, it just wasn't good. And then this new company announces that they're coming out with a system and looking for testers. And that company was Hydra, the Hydra Nemesis. So I contact them and say, this is the car I have. I'm in Hawaii, but you guys are in Oakland. I'm getting transferred back to the States. So I'm going to be driving through Oakland. Like that's where the port is anyways. So let's do this. I'll buy a system. And so they installed the Nemesis on my car and drove it around, got it tuned for me well enough and gave it to me. And they said, this is a fast freaking Subaru, man. I was like, thanks. Like we haven't had one that was like this fast, the GC. But the cam selection that I had was really the biggest thing. Having good cams on that NA motor made a big difference from the turbo. So so they gave me that, and then it was like I had my laptop and I had this Hydra, and they don't tell you how to use it, right?
Right.
And I'm just there for like a couple of days. I'm driving across country. So I'm like,
boy.
I'm the cat on the keyboard, trying to figure out how this thing works. And so I blew that thing up.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I didn't know I blew it up. Honestly, it just ran so good all the time. There was a lot of oil everywhere.
Right.
And so I thought, man, this turbo's bad. Yeah, this turbo's bad. That's what it is. So I take the turbo out. I go to this company that specializes in turbos I'm back in New York again, in New York. And the guy's like, yeah, man, this turbo's fine. I'm like, but there's oil everywhere. He's like, yeah, it's probably your engine. I'm like, what do you mean? And he hands me this sheet. And the sheet was like turbocharger troubleshooting, It's like the turbocharger does this, your engine's blown. Turbocharger does this, your engine's blown. The turbocharger does this, your engine's blown. Turbocharger this, it might be the turbo. Turbocharger this, your engine's blown. It was like everything it's actually your engine, turbo's fine.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll pull the engine out and find out. Sure enough, I had broken ring lands on all 4 pistons.
Okay.
Yep. And then I was like, oh, that's what a broken ring land is. That was my introduction to that. That wasn't a thing, right? We didn't have EJ257s blowing ring lands yet.
Right.
And so maybe I'm the first guy to blow ring lands. I don't know.
I seem to recall a lot of guys having issues. There's turboing the RSs as you did was kind of one of those, like all the people that like the RS better. That's what one of the first things that people decided to do before they started swapping the cars. Because later, like the problems, all the difficulties of getting it to run properly, that the engine wasn't built to make that kind of power, that all these sorts of issues. That's where kind of swaps and people pulling engines and transmissions out of the JDM cars. I think that was one of the big motivators, is just how challenging it was to really turn up the wick in the 2.5 RS. Can be done, but at the time it was, with the tools available, it was definitely challenging.
And it's still expensive, even now.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
you
yeah.
bring an RS and you want to do a swap, like we're doing wiring harness and ECU
Yeah.
and plus the engine and all the labor. It's like 20 something hours of labor minimum,
Yeah.
for that. And we have the stuff now, right? We have the
Yeah.
answers, we have the formulas, we have the parts. Back then it was, we were making things up,
Yeah.
I made my own coil on plug setup.
Oh wow.
I took the igniters out of a factory coil. I cut them out of the coil and I soldered wires onto all the terminals of the igniters and I
Oh
ran them to
man.
other coils. I made my own coil and plug setup. Like we didn't have that stuff.
Yeah.
And I had these igniters just dangling inside my engine bay with all these wires hanging off of them, running coils. And it wasn't even individual coils. Well, it was, but it was what were they? They were 2 coil ones that I like divided up and had, it was a Frankenstein, but it was what I
Wow.
did to get more spark.
Well, you're thinking that far ahead. You know what some of the advantages are from the new cars. You're trying to apply it to your car, to your situation. You've got all these tools in your toolbox to try and like fabricate these things, figure out these solutions.
Yeah, yeah. I've always been a troubleshooter. Always been an inventor of sorts. I've always trying to do things a little differently or push envelopes for sure.
Sure.
And oh yeah, so hydronemesis. So I'm
Yep.
blowing things up. I'm putting engines in the car, I'm blowing them up, putting engines in the car. I'm learning the weak points of the Subaru. I'm learning how to time an EJ, right? Like
Yeah.
every engine up to that point, you time it TDC, but these you time it 90 degrees. So my first time trying to time one, I'm like, why won't this cam turn? Because I'm jamming
Mhm.
valves in the piston.
Oh.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
there's 2 marks on that thing. Oh, turn that back, that kind of thing. So, um, there wasn't a lot of people doing this stuff yet. And so I
Right.
didn't have anyone to lean on for that. I was just going in there and trying it. I did an engine swap in a friend's car. He had a coupe and we did a wiring merge. We did a
Oh
wire
yeah.
merge, and I had never done it before, but we freaking spent hours doing it. I soldered my hand to some stuff, like I had scars on
Uh-huh.
it. We spent forever doing this swap. It was a front wheel drive car. We did do an all wheel drive swap, and it was
Oh.
a 1.8 or something like that. We did do a 2.5. And so we were doing, it wasn't a turbo engine because that wasn't really a
Right.
big thing yet that we had access to, but we
Okay.
bought him to a 2.5 liter and all-wheel drive and all this stuff. So I did this wiring merge on my table in my living room, right, with
Wow.
this college kid that
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
friends with in the Subaru club. So I was doing that, and then let's see, had some troubles, got divorced again, moved to Virginia with the military. And that is when the tuning for others and getting paid for it really started.
Hmm.
It wasn't really a conscious thing as I'm going to do this now. At any point, it was I met this guy. He was starting a shop. They bought a dyno. I never played with a dyno before.
Okay.
Um, but he didn't know anybody else that could tune cars or Subarus. And I was now it's 2005 now. So
2005.
there's
Okay.
been a bunch of years of playing with cars,
Yeah.
helping people out, and all of that. Open source stuff is just coming out now. The Cobb stuff, we're still in version 1 access port at the time. And
And even that was a big deal because before that you had to actually send your ECU in.
to Cobb.
They would, reflash it, chip it, whatever, and then send the ECU back to you. The access port was this revelation in that you just have this little green brick that you can plug in and it does these magical things.
Yeah, and it was a pain in the
Yep.
ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that just came out. I wasn't a Cobb tuner, but friends were buying the thing for their cars and the software. And when you bought it, you got to modify it if you wanted to, kind of thing. So it was with
Right.
the version 1. So I'm in there adjusting their tunes for people in the club. And then that guy buys a shop and and buys a dyno. And he's like, hey, you want to come and, do some stuff with us? And I was like, sure, that sounds like fun. So I put my car on the dyno, um, and finally get to see what power it actually makes.
Sure.
Instead of just butt tuning everything, right? I just tune
Yeah.
everything at the track or driving around. And then he's like, hey, I got this other car. I think you can tune it. I'm like, sure. And I guess he's like, I'll give you like $200. I'm like, oh, okay. And then he's like, oh man, you did a good job on that car. I got another one. You want to do this other car? I was like, same deal. And he's like, yeah, like, sure, that sounds fun. So I was literally doing it for fun and then was getting paid for it by accident,
Right.
And next thing I know, man, and I'm still in the Navy too, right? So I'm still doing Navy
Okay.
stuff.
Wow.
And next thing I know, people are calling me like crazy. Hey, you tuned my buddy's Evo. Could you help me with mine? I was like, yeah, no problem. Evos are easy, by the way.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, sure, yeah, we can do that. So the next thing I know, I got, a couple $1,000s a month coming in, tuning cars on the side. And um,
And it's worth mentioning at this time, like in the early, like once like really you had tuning software. I mean, this was tuning was in its infancy. And so finding, just like you said, finding people that actually knew how to do it was challenging. Like you mentioned, Shiv, he was one of these guys. He was the first guy I was aware of that was flying around. Like
mhm,
tuning cars was his whole gig, and he was just traveling around the country to places where there were dynos. He tuned my car here many moons ago.
yeah,
And he just would spend a weekend, tune as many cars as he possibly could, and then off to the next location because there was just so few people that really knew how to make the cars work because everything was just so new at the
yeah,
time.
yeah. It was,
And you had basically positioned yourself, you had figured all of these things out, so you're exactly in the right spot when this starts to become a possibility that you just kind of fell into it, it sounds.
yeah, it really is that way. Just like how I fell into it back in high school, my friends and their
Hmm.
carburetors, like it wasn't anything I'd planned on doing.
Yeah.
And so 2005, 2006, I'm married again, number three, and she is on a ship on a carrier and stationed on the West Coast up here at Everett, Washington. And I'm in Virginia Beach, where they stationed me. So we're far apart. And so I'm just doing the car thing like crazy, you
Mm.
know. And let's see. Yeah, so I guess the dyno tuning there, and then I get transferred to be closer to my wife finally. The Navy
Mm.
finally transferred me closer to my wife, and I'm in Everett, Washington. And I get there. What happened? Trying to figure out how it started there. GetaDomTune was birthed by my friend Fred Duell. He lives in upstate New York. He was a guy that I was in the Subaru Club in upstate New York back in
Okay.
2004 or 5 when we met. I think it was 4 when we met. And he had a Legacy GT. And in 05-ish or 06, I traveled up to North Carolina for something. And he came down with his Legacy. And he's like, hey, man, would you mess my car over? I was like, hell yeah, I'll do it. You know, So I tuned his Legacy. He had an access port, took it off. I tuned it open source,
Hmm.
and he was like, "Holy crap, this thing is way faster!" And I was glad that he was happy, and
Sure.
and and that was it. And then one day, I get an email from a guy, and he says, "Hey, this guy Fred, you tune his Legacy. I told him I have a Legacy, and I'm going to get an access port." And he said, "Screw the access port, man. Get a freaking DOM tune." This is what he
Uh-huh.
said to him, and that was in the email. And I thought, well, that was really nice of Fred, and it hadn't really clicked yet.
Hmm.
And then as the phone calls start coming in, as I'm on the West Coast, and shops are asking me, "Hey, would you come tune for us at our shop?" I realized maybe I could do something, like really do something over here. I need a website, so I
Hmm.
started DT Racing, which everyone that
Okay.
called asked, "Is this D Tracing?" And I
Oh.
was like, shit, I screwed that up.
Hmm.
And so at the time, it was get a Dom tune. It was a logo on it. Forget the access port, man. Get a freaking Dom tune was on the logo.
Okay.
or on the heading of the website.
Mm-hmm.
And so DT Racing, GetaDomTune. And then it just kept snowballing until eventually that's the website and the business name, GetaDomTune.
And you're still doing that today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
It's
so
evolved.
yeah, for sure. And I want to touch on that. And I think it because we've got as much of this origin story here, I'm going to stop it here for
Mhm.
part one. And we're going to get to part two next. So if you're listening and you want to hear, all right, now let's get into this GetaDomTune stuff. Like tell us all about these parts that you've developed and what you're doing with GetaDomTune. That's going to be in part two. So thank you for listening to part one. Thanks for your support as always. Stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning. And if you want to hear the next part of the conversation, tune in next week for part two. And now we're in part two of our conversation
Thanks
with
everyone
Dom
for
at
tuning in
GetaDom.
to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatirons.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.